Hello, in this video you're going to learn how to create and edit cinematics using the sequencer tool in Unreal Engine. And if you want to learn even more about creating cinematics in Unreal, I encourage you to check out my full cinematic course. Link will be in the description of this video, where we'll make a full cinematic using metahumans from complete scratch, and it'll cover everything you need to know about creating cinematics in Unreal Engine. With that said, let's get on with the video. So, before we start designing our cinematic, I want to design our cinematic in a much nicer environment. The default Unreal Engine environment is kind of boring, so what we're going to do is import an asset pack from the Unreal Engine Marketplace. So to do that, open up the Epic Schemes launcher. Once you've done that, go over to the Marketplace tab, and we want to go to Browse, and go Epic Content. Then in the search tags, select Environments, and then we just want to download this Infinity Blade Grassland pack. This kind of looks a bit nice, and it'll be nice to create some cinematic shots with the environment that this asset pack comes with. So we'll be using this. Just go Add to Project and select your cinematic project. So I'll just look for it and select it, then go Add to Project. This will install it and add it to your project. Now if I go to my content drawer, there should be a folder called Infinity Blade Grasslands. Just go over to Maps and go to the Elven Ruins. So once the map loads, it should look something like this, and our player character starts here. If I click the play button, I start off as the third person mannequin in this level, and it kind of looks like a nice level. So this is going to be where we're going to be creating our cinematics for in the upcoming lectures. Hello, in this video I'm going to introduce you to the sequencer tool. The sequencer tool basically allows us to create and manage the cinematic cutscenes that we make inside of our game. To get started using it, if we go over to the content drawer, and inside of the content folder, if we just right click and create a new folder and just call it cinematics, then if we head inside this folder and right click again and go cinematics, then level sequence, just call this shot 1, then drag this somewhere into the level. Then if we just click open level sequence, this will open up the sequencer tool. And the first thing we're going to see is this timeline. And with this timeline, what we can do is basically add and arrange keyframes to control the timing and animation of different elements in our sequencer. So you'll see what I mean by this in a second. By default, everything is shown in frames. So at frame 0 we can make something happen, then at frame 30 we can make something happen. I think it's more helpful to see things in seconds. So what we can do is just click this 30 FPS button, then go to show time as, and change this to be seconds, and this will show our sequencer timeline in seconds. And I think this just makes it a bit easier to work with. So at 0 seconds we can make something happen, then at 1 second we can make something happen, and so on. So the next thing we're going to do is add something to our sequence that we can basically manipulate with our timeline. So we're going to add a camera which is going to move around our level. So to do this, we just want to go to here where it says quickly add things to the project. Just click on it. Then if we just go all actors, then select the camera actor. And we've now added this camera actor to our level. We're now going to add this to our sequencer so we can kind of play around with it. So make sure you've selected the camera actor too. Then if we just go track, then go actor to sequence. If you've selected the camera actor too, you should see it here. Or if you don't, you can just manually search for an actor that you'd like to add to the sequencer by searching for it here. So I'm just going to click it, and this will add my camera actor to my sequence. When I added my camera, it's also made it so I've had the view of the camera. Right now I don't want this, so what I'm going to do is just click this little arrow, and this will make it so I stop viewing from the camera's perspective and I have my normal view again. So let's showcase how the sequencer works. I'm just going to move this to 0, and then I'm just going to adjust my camera so it's facing this angel statue. So I'm just going to move it, and then I'm going to go to select and rotate objects, and just rotate it so it's facing this angel statue. So in the track sequence, you're going to see there are many different things we can kind of track. We can track its field of view, which is kind of displays how zoomed in or zoomed out the camera is going to be. I'm just going to change this back to 90. And we can also track its transform, which is its location, rotation, and scale. Right now, I'm going to track my camera's transform. So I'm just going to move this to 0. I can also just type in 0 here and it'll take me to 0 in my timeline. And I'm just going to click this little add new key, and this will basically save my camera's location, rotation and scale. Then at let's say 1 second into my sequencer, I'm just going to go to select and translate objects and make it so my camera moves forward and up a bit. Then I'll just click this add new key. Then over the duration of 1 second, my camera is going to move from here to here. Nice. And one more thing with our sequencer tool. With the camera actor 2 selected, if we just go to the details panel, you're going to notice next to some of the settings of the camera, there is this little tag. Anything with this little tag, we can basically add it to our sequencer and basically track it. So if I wanted to, I could track the aspect ratio of my camera. The aspect ratio is kind of whether my camera is going to be full screen or not. So if I just leave this unchecked, if my camera was like this, it's going to display everything the camera sees. With the constraint aspect ratio, I'm only going to see kind of whatever my aspect ratio is here. So if I wanted to basically control this in my cutscene, what I could do is if I go to second 0 and then click this add keyframe, so it's going to basically track that I want to constrain my aspect ratio. Then if I go, let's say, to second 150, I can leave this unchecked. Then it'll basically check to see at second 150, it's going to unconstrain my aspect ratio. So basically anything with a tag here, we can basically add it to our track sequence. I don't actually want this, so I'm just gonna select it, right click and then go delete, and that will remove it. And then one more thing with our sequence, the sequencer will basically start wherever this green arrow is, and the sequence will end wherever this red arrow is. So right now our sequence is 5 seconds. Maybe I want it to be 3 seconds, so I'll just change it to be here. And then I will basically move this to, let's say, 270 to 2 seconds and 7. And at this second, I'm basically just going to make it so the camera zooms back out. So I'll just go add new key. And the way my camera is going to move, initially it's going to move up to this angel, and then it will move back. So this is just a very simple cutscene. And to basically make a sequence play in our game, what we can do is if I just select my shot 1, then if I go here and go open level blueprint, I can right click and create a reference to my shot 1. I can drag off here and look for play sequence, and we want this one, play sequence player. And then if I just right click and look for event begin play and connect this into here and just go compile and close this. If I click the play button, as soon as my game starts, it's going to play that sequence that I just made. So that is basically a basic introduction to the sequencer tool, and we're going to be using this to create and animate our cinematic cutscenes in our game later on in this course. Hello, in this video I'm going to showcase the Autokey feature. So in the last lecture, whenever we made a change to our camera's position, what we had to do is basically add a new key. There's another way that we can actually do this, and that is with the Autokey, and that will basically just automatically add a key in our timeline track. So let's go over how to use it. I'm just going to increase my timeline so it's 5 seconds, and to turn on the Autokey, just select this little key icon, and then if say I go to second 3, 5 in my timeline, with the Autokey on, if say I move it, let's say I just move the camera up, and this is roughly where I want it to be. The Autokey is basically going to automatically track what I've moved. So because I moved the location of my camera, we can see it's added this Autokey. I'm just going to move this to 4, and then maybe I want to move the camera back so it's closer, and it will automatically key that. Right now we can see it's just auto-keying the location of my camera. If I wanted to auto-key everything, what I can do is just go here, then I can go key all, and that will make it so it keys everything. So if say I just move the camera actually back, we can see the Autokey will key everything. So using Autokey can be helpful if you want things to just be done automatically for you. Then one more thing, when working with the sequencer tool, you may find you want to move and adjust some keyframes. So let's go over how you do that. If we just manually select with our left mouse button, it will kind of create this little box and I can select the keyframes I want to move. So if I just select this and then move this forward, this will kind of make it so it'll take longer for my camera to transition to this position. So we can manually edit where keyframes are by doing this. If you want a bit more precision, what we can do is just click this wrench tool where it says actions. Then if we just go to transform selection, it will pop up this window, and here we can specify how far we want to move our keyframe. So if I just type in 1, with my keyframe selected, if I just click this add button, it's going to move my keyframes forward 1 second. If I click the minus button, then it's going to subtract my keyframes 1 second. So you can just do this if you want a bit more precision when adjusting some keyframes. Hello, in this video, we're going to make it so that there are multiple cameras in our level, and during our cutscene, it's going to swap between these multiple cameras, because that's normally what happens in a cutscene. It's not just from one camera perspective. So to get started doing this, if we go over to the content drawer, and inside of the cinematics folder, just right click, go cinematics, then select level sequence, and just call this the master shot, and drag and place this somewhere into our level. Then if we just open up this level sequence, we want to go track, and then we just want to add a shot track. This will basically allow us to add any sequence that is currently in our level. If we just click add new shot, we can select the shot 1 that we just made, and that's going to add the shot 1 that we made. So what we're going to do is add another shot and then combine it. That way we can have multiple shots in our cinematic cutscene. So if I go back to my content drawer, I'm going to right click and go cinematics, then select level sequence, and I'll just call this shot 2. And then I will open this up, and then I'm going to go to a different place in my level. So I'm going to go around here, and a quick little shortcut. If we want to add a camera in this exact position that the viewport is facing, what we can do is just click these 3 little lines here, and then we can go create camera here, then just select camera actor, and it'll create a camera actor exactly where our viewport is. So I'm just going to track this camera to this sequence. So I'm going to go track, actor to sequence, and then add this camera actor 5. It's going to give me the viewport of this. Right now I don't want this, so I'm going to click this little stop piloting actor. And then I also have my auto key on, so we can turn this off or on if you want to use it. For now I'm just going to turn this off, and I'm just going to track the transform of my camera. And then let's say, actually I'm going to turn auto key back on, and I'm just going to move my camera forward, and then I'm going to increase this, and I'm just going to rotate my camera up a bit, and then make it look like the camera is kind of moving up the stairs. And then let's say around here, I will rotate my camera down a bit and then make him move towards this second angel statue. And then I'm just gonna drag this red line because my cutscene's only around 3.5 seconds. And this is basically the second shot in my cutscene. We can just go back to our content drawer and open up the master shot, and I'm just going to add this as a second shot to this master shot. So the way I can do that is just go add shot, then I can select shot 2, and this will add my shot 2. Right now we can see this shot 2 is beneath it. What I want to do is actually play shot 1, then shot 2. So if you just press the control button and scroll with your mouse wheel, this will kind of zoom out the timeline editor. And what I'm going to do is just select this red arrow, because currently right now the master shot is only 5 seconds, and I want it to be around, let's say, 9 seconds. Then if I just select this shot 2, I can drag and place it so it's at the end of shot 1, and that'll make it so after shot 1 has played, it's going to switch to shot 2. In my outlier, I'm just going to look for my master shot and select it. Then if I just go over to my level blueprint, I will right click, create a reference to the master shot, and actually connect it into here and just delete it. That way it's going to play my master shot, which is going to play shot 1 and then shot 2. So let's test this out. If I go play, it plays my shot 1, which is kind of a weird shot. And after it's played shot 1, it'll play my shot 2 where I move up the stairs and then view this angel statue. Nice. So with that, we basically combined these 2 shots. Hello, in this video, I'll be introducing you to the cinematic camera. This is the camera that we're actually going to use for our cutscenes, and the way Unreal Engine has made it is that it actually mimics how cameras in real life work and behave. So there are multiple ways that we can add a cinematic camera to our project. The first way is if we just go to this quickly add things to the project, then we can go cinematics and select cinematic camera actor, and this will add a cinematic camera actor to our level. So here it is. I'm just gonna delete this as there's another more convenient way that we can add a cinematic camera, and that is through our sequencer. So if I just open up the content drawer and I'm gonna go to my shot 2 sequence, and for the time being I'm actually just gonna delete my shot 2. So I'm just gonna select this and delete it and delete everything. Then to add a cinematic camera to the sequence, what we can do is just click this camera icon, create a new camera, and this will create a new cinematic camera. So I'm just going to position where I want my cinematic camera to be in the pilot mode. So I'm going to have my cinematic camera, let's say, start here. Now I'm just going to click exit pilot mode, and I'm going to show you some of the settings of the cinematic camera. So if we just go over to the details panel, one thing the cinematic camera has is tracking. So we can make our cinematic camera always track a specific actor. So if I just click this enable look tracking, my cinematic camera is going to track something. Right now we've not set it to track anything, so it's just looking at the floor. But if I go and click this little actor to track and click this little pipette, I can pick something in my scene I want my cinematic to always track. So I'm going to make it track this angel statue, and as we can see, the cinematic camera will track it, and if I just move it, the cinematic camera is always going to be tracking this angel statue. As we can see, it's a bit off. What we can do is add a relative offset to the thing we're tracking. So if I just click this little arrow, and I'm just going to increase the offset in the Z, and that kind of moves the cinematic camera up a bit, so we can add an offset to the thing that we're tracking. We can also add this look at tracking interp, and if I just, for example, make this 3, that basically means it's going to be a bit smoother. So if I just leave this at 3, then move my camera, you're going to notice it's kind of smooth when I'm moving it. So you can just play around with that value to kind of make it smooth when you're transitioning with the cinematic camera. So the next setting we can change in our cinematic camera is the film back. I can change the width and the height of my camera. So if I just adjust this value, we can see it's adjusting basically the width and the height of my camera. Unreal Engine comes with some presets that we can select. So if I just select this custom, I can make it 16:9. This is typically what's used when you're recording a film. I can change it to be this Super 8mm. So there are loads of different presets that it comes with, or you can just make your own custom one. I'm just going to leave this at the film. Then the next setting we can change is the lens setting. So there is this min focal length and the max focal length. I'm going to showcase an image on the screen. The focal length will basically tell us how much of our scene is going to be captured. So the higher the focal length, the more zoomed in it's going to be. So there are a couple of presets that it comes with. If I make this something like 200mm, then we're going to see it's going to be really, really zoomed in. If I make this something like 12, then it's going to be quite zoomed out and capture the whole scene. So depending on the shot you're trying to make, you may want to have the focal length be very zoomed out so it captures the whole scene, or very zoomed in so it's focusing on something very specific. And again, we can customize the settings of this if we want to, but I'm just going to leave this at the default universal zoom, but we can play around with the max and min focal length. Then the next main setting you may play around with is the focus setting. So when we're making our cinematic, we can make it so certain objects are in focus and certain objects are out of focus. So you may want to be highlighting a specific character or a specific item in your cutscene, and we do that with the focus settings. So right now the focus is on manual, which means we can basically manually control what the camera is going to be focusing on. If I just click this draw debug focus plane, right now everything in our shot is in focus, but if say I just wanted to focus on this angel, I can click this pipette, then I will click it, and then we can see in our cinematic camera actor, basically this angel character is now in focus. We can manually adjust this value here, so maybe I want this whole shot to be in focus, or maybe I just want this angel to be in focus. So we can make it so we can manually set the focus value inside of our cinematic camera. Although maybe when you're making your cinematic shot, you want it so your object is always in focus. What we can do is change the focus method to be tracking. Then we can specify what we want our cinematic camera to have in focus. So if I just click this pipette, then select this angel statue, no matter where I move my camera, it's always going to make sure that the angel actor is in focus. And again, we can add a relative offset if we want there to be kind of an offset to the focus. And similar to how we have this look at track interp value, we have an interp value for controlling the focus, for how smooth in you want it to sink in and out. And then the final setting you may play around with is the crop setting. So we can make it so our camera has a crop. We can choose one of the predefined templates here. So our cinematic camera will have this crop, or you can just make it have no crop. The final setting you may want to change is the constraint aspect ratio. By default, our camera has an aspect ratio. If you want it so basically there's no aspect ratio during your cinematic cutscene and you want to show basically everything without borders, you just leave this constraint aspect ratio unchecked. You may use this if, for example, you're making an in-game cinematic and you kind of don't want there to be an aspect ratio for your camera. So these are the main settings of the cinematic camera. It's a bit more advanced than the default camera, but I just wanted to get us set up using the normal camera first. And now we know what the cinematic camera is. In the future lectures, we're going to be using the cinematic camera. Oh, and there's one more thing in the cinematic camera that you may adjust, which I forgot to mention, and that is the current aperture. So the way this works is this basically controls how much light is going to be seen by our camera. The lower this is, basically more light the camera is going to allow and see, and the higher the value this is, the less light that there is going to be in our camera scene. It's kind of hard to see right now because I'm in a very well lit environment, but if you wanted there to be basically a lot of light to be in your scene and you want to show all the light, then you'll make sure that the current aperture is kind of a low value, and if you want to have less light showing in your scene, then you'll make the current aperture a higher value. So with that, we've kind of explored the cinematic camera. I'm now going to create a quick cinematic shot. I'm just going to constrain my aspect ratio because I want to do that. And I also still have my cinematic camera tracking my angel statue inside my level. And I also have this Autokey on. So at second 0, I'm just going to track my cinematic camera's transform. And then I'm going to go all the way to the end, so around here. And I'm just going to make my cinematic camera kind of move on like this. And then we'll be able to see. Okay, so I'm just going to track its transform. And then we can see this is how my cinematic camera is going to be. It looks a bit stuttery because we're not in the cinematic yet, but if I just save this and then I go play, we can see my normal camera, and this is my cinematic camera. You'll notice how smooth the movement is when I'm moving with my cinematic camera. And with that, we've just done a basic introduction to the cinematic camera. In this video, I'm going to go over how to use the camera rig rail. So this is basically a rail which we can attach our cinematic camera to, and we can kind of create cool shots with this. So to showcase what I mean, if we go over to quickly add things to the project, then go cinematic and select the camera rig rail. This will add a rig rail. Now to attach our cinematic camera to it, if we go over to the outlier and look for cinematic, okay, so I can't see my cinematic camera and I know why. If we just go over to the content drawer and open up shot 2, so if I now go to my outlier tab and look for the cinematic camera actor, we're going to see it. And you're going to notice it has this lightning bolt next to it. This lightning bolt is also here. And what this basically means is when our sequencer is playing in our game / when we load it up, our cinematic camera is going to spawn whenever the sequence is open. So to make it so our cinematic camera always exists in our game, what we can do is just right click and go convert to possessable, and that will make it so my cinematic camera just exists in my world. If I want it so a specific actor or thing only spawns when my sequence is playing, what we can do is just select it, right click, and then go convert to spawnable, and now this would only spawn when my sequence is playing. But I want this to exist all the time, so I'm just going to right click and change this back to convert to possessable. And I'm also just going to uncheck this enable look at tracking and make sure that this is tracking nothing. So to attach this to my rig rail, what I can do is just right click on it, then I can just look for attach to, and I'll just look for my camera rig rail. So I'll just select it and this will attach it to the rig rail. Right now it's not actually on it, so what we can do is just click these 2 arrows and that will just reset the orientation of my camera. And I'm just going to move my camera up a bit, and now my camera is basically attached to this rig rail. If I was to just select this rig rail, this goes from a value of 0 to 1. So current position on rail. As I move this, my camera is going to move along this rail. To make it so this rail is longer, what we can do is just select this endpoint, then press Alt on your keyboard, and if I just select with my mouse, that will allow me to make this rail longer. There's also another way to add points, and that is to just select somewhere on the rig rail, right click, whoops, so I think I just misclicked. If I just right click, if I just select this rail and then right click somewhere on it, I can go add spline point here, and that will add a spline point at that specific point in the rig rail. And we can also adjust the position of the rig rail. So if I just select a point, you're going to notice these 2 points which appear next to it. So here and here. If I just select one of them and adjust it, I can kind of adjust the curvature of my rig rail. So we can kind of use this to make a rail. So I'm just going to make a rail which kind of follows around my angel. So I'm just going to select my rig rail and let's say move it here. And then I'm just going to select this point and kind of expand it. I will select this point and expand it. And then I'm just going to press the Alt button and kind of make it curve around this angel statue. Then if I just select current position on rail and move this from 0 to 1, we can see my cinematic camera kind of moving along the rail. It's kind of off, so what I can do is just select my cinematic camera and I'm gonna just rotate it so it's like this. And then if I just select my rig rail, as I move it, we can see it kind of looping around. Although you'll notice it's not kind of rotating with the rig rail. To make it rotate with it, what we can do is just check this, lock orientation to rail, and that will kind of make it so this camera rig kind of rotates with our camera rig rail. So that can be helpful if you want it to do that. But sometimes you may not want it to do that, so it's understandable if you leave this unchecked. But if you want it to kind of orientate with it, make sure that this is checked. So with this, we've kind of made a camera rig rail. Let's make a quick cinematic with it. So what I'm going to do is actually just delete my sequence 2. So I'm just going to delete everything. And it seems to have moved my cinematic camera. So it kind of moved it to, I think, the starting position because I deleted everything. So I'm just going to click these 2 arrows to reset its orientation. And I'll just move it up and rotate it. Then I'm just going to select my camera rig rail and go track. And if I go active to sequence, and then I'm just going to add my camera rig rail. I want to add this tag to track the current position on the rig rail. And I'm just going to move this to the end around 2.7. And then I'm going to make this 1. So I'll just type in 1 here. So it's at the end. And basically over the course of 2.7 seconds, my rig rail is going to take my camera across the rail that I just made. And then the second thing I'm going to add is my cinematic camera. So if I just select it and then go track, active to sequence, and then add the cinematic camera actor. And I'm just going to exit the pilot because we know how it's going to kind of look. When we select a camera, we can kind of preview it here. And now we can test this out. So if I go play, I'll show my first shot, and then I'll play my second shot where the cinematic camera is going around the rig rail. So it's kind of janky at the start. Maybe I kind of need to adjust this, but now we have an understanding of how the rig rail works. So we can just use this to kind of make the camera smoothly move along a rail. Hello, in this video I'm going to go over another cinematic tool, the camera rig crane. This basically allows us to add a camera rig to our projects which we can move around the cinematic camera with. So to add this to our projects, let's go here where it says quickly add things to the project, then go cinematics and select the camera rig crane. So this will add a camera rig crane. Let's add a cinematic camera to attach to this. So I'm just going to go here, cinematics, then select the cinematic camera actor. And to attach this to the camera rig crane, if I just right click on it, then go attach to, then look for the rig crane. So I'll just select it. And if I just scroll up to the top and just click this arrow, this will reset the position of my camera. I'm just going to move it forward a bit. Then if I select my camera rig crane, let's go over the different ways that we can move this. So we can adjust the pitch of it. This will move it up and down, and we can adjust the crane yaw, which will move it to the left and right, depending on which value we put. So by default, the camera is going to remain stationary no matter how we adjust the pitch or the yaw. If we want it to move with the pitch or yaw, what we can do is just check these boxes, lock mount pitch and lock mount yaw, and this will make it so the camera will move with the pitch or yaw. So it's kind of similar to the camera rig rail. You may want to just use this to make sure that your camera is smoothly moving when you're recording a cinematic shot. Hello, so we're almost finished with our introduction to the sequencer tool. In this video, I just wanted to cover some of the features that sequencer could do that I've not covered yet. So if you just go to your outline tab and look for the master shot and just select it, it will appear in the details panel and there are a bunch of settings that we can change. So one of the settings we can change is autoplay. If we just check this, and then if I go over to my level blueprint and just right click here and break this link, instead of coding it so that as soon as my game starts the sequence will play, if I just have this autoplay and then go play, my sequence will automatically start playing when I'm inside of my game. I'm just gonna leave this unchecked. Then we have the loop. Maybe you want it so your sequence loops a certain amount of times before it finishes. So what we can do is just click here, then go loop exactly, and then specify the number of times we want the sequencer to loop. Or you can make it loop indefinitely. I'm not sure why you'd want to do this, but maybe in certain situations this may be applicable. I'll just change this back to don't loop. We can change the play rate of the sequencer, so maybe you want it to be faster. So here's why I would do it. If I made this 2, then the sequencer would play twice as fast. We can change the start offset, so maybe you want it so the sequencer skips the first couple of seconds of your sequence. Here's where you basically adjust that with the start offset. So if I made this 1, it will start 1 second deep into my sequence. We can make it have a random start time. Then we have this restore state. Later on we're going to basically cover this in a bit more detail, but in a nutshell what this restore state does is, say we're making a sequence and I make it so in the sequence this angel statue moves up. I can make it so the sequencer will basically save this change, and after my sequence has finished loading, the angel will still be up in the air. If I basically click this restore state, it'll basically mean that the sequencer won't save any of the changes that I've made to the world. We have the pause at end, so just before your sequencer finishes playing, you can make it just pause. Then we have some cinematic settings, so maybe you want it so the player can't move or look around when the sequence is playing. So we can just check these 2 boxes and that will prevent the player from moving and looking around, because you may want it so that the player can't actually move when the sequence is playing. If I just check this autoplay button and then go play, I'm just going to move around with my player character and you can see they're moving. Maybe you want it so the player character can't actually move when the sequence is playing, so that's how you basically disable that. You just check these 2 boxes, and maybe you want it so the player, you can't actually see them when the sequence is playing, so you just check this and this would hide the player. And then we have the hide HUD. Right now we don't have any visual elements on our screen, but if say maybe you had a HUD that was on your screen and you wanted to hide it when the sequence was playing, we could just check this hide HUD. And then we have disable camera cuts. If you don't want there to be any camera cuts during your sequence, you just check that. So those are some of the settings that we can basically play around with inside of the sequence. Then there's one more thing I want to show you. If I just open up the content drawer and let's open up my shot 2. What we can do is actually go to the curve editor and you can kind of just change some things. So right now, this is my second shot where I have the camera rig rail, which goes from a value of 0 to 1. If I just click this little wavelength diagram here, it will show me the curve editor and I can basically adjust some things. So I'm just going to select my camera rig rail, and this will basically show me the curve of the camera rig rail going from the value of 0 all the way to 1. So from 0 to 1. If you want to, you can basically adjust this curve. So if say I select, let's select this endpoint, and then I can adjust it, and this will basically make the curve a bit smoother when it's basically going from the value of 0 to 1. So I can just adjust this however I want. Maybe I want it to kind of like slow down at the end and then kind of stop and then go. So you can basically adjust the curve of anything inside of the timeline to basically kind of get it to fit how you want to. So I just wanted to go over the curve editor. That way you can get a bit more precise movement of the thing you're trying to edit inside of the sequencer timeline. So those are just the settings I wanted to show you, as I've not really covered them yet. But with that, I think we've done an introduction of the basics of how to use the sequencer tool. That's all for this video. And if you want to learn even more about creating cinematics, I encourage you to check out my full cinematic course. Link will be in the description of this video. If you enjoyed, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!